What is the most WTF thing you've experienced seen during a flight? I once looked out the window to see a MiG-23 flying beside us. Close enough to clearly make out the pilot looking at us. He stayed there for a minute or two longer. Then banked away. This was in 1988 or 89. Flying from Moscow to Kiev, I believe it was in an IL-62M. I'm a bit of a plane nut. The Russian air traffic control system is as follows. You're given 3 things. A height, a route, and a speed. If you deviate from any of these 3 things, you're joined by a MiG-23 on each wing. And you land at the nearest available airfield. The passengers continue by coach. And the crew are never seen again. It's a very good system, so you don't get repetitive faults. And we were going to try it in the West. But we don't have enough fighters to put one on each wing. Oh, Sir David Gunson. Flying from Atlanta to Washington, D.C. We were about 45 seconds post takeoff when the guy beside me unbuckled himself and started running up the incredibly steep aisle. The flight attendants immediately start yelling at him to sit down. Even going so far as to fumble with the intercom. About 10 feet from the front of the plane, one of the crew said, "Flight lady. Sir. I'm going to have to demand you sit down." Guy. "Mom. I am going to shit my pants." He barricaded himself in the bathroom for about 10 minutes and emerged to clapping and angry looks from flight attendants. He ordered a water with no ice in it when they got to our aisle. Remembering his drink order is the best part of that story. I saw someone fart themselves awake then go back to sleep. Till farting while walking down the aisle is called crop dusting. On a red-eye flight, just as I fell asleep, a woman passed out in the middle of the aisle and hit my leg. I was so doped up on Dramamine I didn't even realize it and fell back asleep. The flight attendants put an oxygen tank on the floor and put the tank's mask over her mouth. Apparently they used my hand to hold it in place. So when I woke up a few minutes later, I was like, why am I holding an oxygen mask over someone's face? Some people are sleepwalkers. I'm a sleep hero. I wonder what caused the cat to die. It probably actually overheated. Small space. Hot plane. Long-haired cat. That's not a good recipe. Cats don't pant unless they're in dire straits, man. The freak out was probably the end spasms. It was already a goner by then. I was on a Gulf Air, as in Persian Gulf, flight as a kid in the late 80s. And a Pakistani family a few rows behind me in coach lit up a barbecue. It was one of those little portable aluminum foil things. You never heard so many flight attendants scream so loud. I walked onto the plane and gave the first steward I saw a bag of Hershey's miniatures. This is for the crew. The whole flight I was given free headphones and all the free drinks I could handle. I tried to pay but she just kept giving me my money back with every drink. Noted. I was about 15 and flirting with a cute girl in the seat next to me. My family was about 2 rows back with my younger brother, and the lady that occupied the 3rd seat pretty much set me up the entire flight. This old lady was the best wingman ever. Anyway, I get up to use the restroom and she says she has to go too. She gets out first and I'm waiting for her to finish up. We've been flirting pretty much the whole flight and she knows that I'm right behind her in line. So she finishes using the bathroom and I walk in. Right there in the toilet is a gigantic unflushed tea. To this day I have no idea how you respond to something like that. Maybe she forgot from being nervous about flirting with you. Adjusting her hair in the mirror and tea. Making sure there's no booger sticking out. In any case, the way you respond to something like that is you take a tea next to her unflushed tea. And if it's smaller than hers, she's a keeper. Not really a WTF, but kind of funny. So we're flying out of Cleveland and the pilot comes over the PA and gives his welcome. Blah blah, so we're just leaving Cleveland. We should be in. And then slightly under his breath. But not quiet enough that everyone else didn't hear, he says. Where the hell we going? Long pause. Chicago. Everyone laughed. Good times in high times. Similar story. While on a US Airways flight, the attendant was introducing the in-flight movie. And tonight's in-flight movie is Batman Begins. Staring. Long pause. Batman. I sat beside a Scientologist who tried to convince me to go into business with him. He wouldn't explain what the business was. Cake and grief counseling will be available at the end of the testing period. An autistic man walking up one of the aisles in first class. Pants down. Pooping the whole way. I was flying to Denver on Delta in winter 2009. And they were switching from cash to credit only. They just go their brand new machines to swipe cards, and I was one of the first people to test them out. I ordered a 7 and 7. It was $7. She took my card, swiped it. And the thing that printed out was $0. I left a $3 tip and thought, cool. About 10 minutes later she came by and asked if I wanted another. I said sure. Why not? Swipe the card. Another $0 transaction. Bought lunch. $0. So I ordered for more 7 and 7s and got hammered for around $20 in tip. Checked my bank account the day after and sure enough, only the tip showed up. I have no idea what happened. But that was one happy flight attendant. One time I was the only person on a very big plane going from DC to Atlanta. They told me they wouldn't normally fly, but they really needed the plane in Atlanta first thing in the morning. I got great service, by the way. Since then I have used this as the setting for an erotic fantasy. An older man unsuccessfully attempting to get a hand job from his wife in the seat ahead of me. Honey, I got the blanket in place. My wife was coming to visit me in Africa a few months ago. On some third world airline. A passenger sitting next to her pulls out his cock and starts pissing in a bottle. Then hands it to a stewardess, who didn't even bat an eye. I didn't know Discovery Channel made Bear Grylls fly coach. Figures he'd be first class. I was in an aisle seat on a flight from LA to Austin. PX. About an hour into the flight I notice this awful smell. I look up from my book just in time to see this 70-year-old woman violently throwing up in her lap. Since I'm a sympathy vomiter, I turn toward the people in the other seats to try and avoid doing the same thing. After about a minute of this and the rancid smell of old people vomit, she is led to the bathroom. As she is leaving her seat, she shits herself in the seat. So I get to spend the rest of the flight gagging as this shit and vomit aroma rapes my nostrils. The flight attendants tried to clean it as best they could, but it made no real improvement. TLDR. Old woman throws up and shits herself on a flight from LA to Austin. I wonder what percent of old people shitting themselves in public are actually trolls. The number is probably low. While waiting to use the water closet on the way to Panama, the door somehow opened while this guy was hunched over the toilet fapping away. There was no mistaking it. This guy looked like a poster boy for the Vinegar Strokes. At first I couldn't believe what I actually saw. As he turned his head to see the door come open, the most awkward eye contact moment of my life unfolded. He turned to shut the door in a panicked fashion, exposing his junk. At that point my WTF face became encrusted into my facial features for the rest of the flight and even the next day. So, since that time I can hardly use any bathroom on a plane. I'd rather just hold it in than see another buckache party. With a bit of luck, his life was ruined forever. Always thinking that just behind some narrow door in all of his favorite airlines, men in red woolen shirts are getting incredible kicks from things you'll never know. I was taking a business flight to Chicago when about halfway through the flight a man was walking back to the lavatory but completely passed out and hit the floor next to me. I was in a hallway seat. People started chattering and calling for help while this guy pops out of first class and says, "Don't worry, I'm a doctor," and assesses the situation like a boss. It was DR. Oz. Imagine how terrifying it would be if you needed medical help in DR. Phil pops out of first class. It was DR. Oz. Poor passed out guy. Any info on how the family took the news of his passing? On the way to Japan I look across aisle and see an old man sitting with an old woman I assume to be his wife. He reaches into his bag and brings out a large stash of PRN mags and proceeds to sit and look at them for many hours of the flight. Well, did he come or what? Jesus Christ. Man. There's just some things you don't talk about in public. I was sitting on a B747 British Airways. We were taking off from Heathrow Airport. Just left the ground and I saw this black thing flapping against the wing. I thought, damn. Must have got a bird or something. Black thing continues to slap and seemingly get bigger. It was a long piece of rubber. Some sort of lining. Seal. Or something. And then it simply just ripped off and ended up in some lucky kid's backyard. How's that for good maintenance? You had a pretty big scare up there. Hot. Dot. You want to see something really scary? I had to get a separate seat from my parents when I was 15. I was watching pre-downloaded YouTube videos on my iPod when some 30-year-old next to me decided to show me a video of his GF giving him a BJ. It was a horrible video. Edit. Alright ladies and gentlemen. This is your captain speaking. We're right on time for our landing in Chicago. We'll be making this flight at 50,000 miles per hour. Flying at 500 feet. I will treasure that mental image forever. Garfield. The bathroom sink on a Bangladeshi Airlines flight from Thailand to Nepal was clogged and had about 1,000 water bugs living in it. I was on a plane that lost power just as it was throttling up for takeoff. And I don't mean they reduced power to the engines, I mean all the lights went out, the engines shut down and we were left sitting on the runway for a good few minutes. Somehow the plane regained power and we taxied to an adjacent tarmac for another few minutes. After this the pilot announces to the passengers that they had a small technical glitch and that we are now ready for takeoff. The rest of the ride was uneventful. The rest of the ride was utterly terrifying. Fix this for you. Flying Seattle to Vegas. A black lady wearing a bizarre Playboy pink sweatsuit sits in front of us. She immediately starts talking non-stop to the business people next to her. She tries 5 times before the plane even leaves the gate to order drinks. The stewardess has pretty much had it with her already. We get in the air and she starts ordering vodka non-stop and gets overly friendly with the poor people sitting next to her. The stewardess eventually cuts her off and the lady goes berserk. She's screaming, "You big fat white bitch. I'm being discriminated," etc. She was arrested when we landed, which I think is extreme. But it was amusing. I was on a flight from Amsterdam to NY one time and there was a kid who was running up and down the aisles trying to bite people. As he was heading down the aisle at full speed, stewardess suddenly pulled the refreshments cart into the aisle right in front of it and he ran smack into it face first. She said to him, "Oh, sorry. Didn't see you coming. You shouldn't run like that down the aisle." Or something like that. I know she did that on purpose. It was awesome. Was it KLM? Cause those Dutch stewardesses don't FCK around. Saw one pick up a toddler to her level, tell it to stop crying. It did. Not on a plane, but in the security line. About 6 years back. While about 10 people in front of my family in the line, a guy runs past the metal detector. It goes off. He doesn't stop. I couldn't tell what one of the security men yelled, but he yelled it 3 times. Instead of stopping the guy, all the guards and people behind the desks run into 2 rooms and close the doors, leaving all us passengers standing there freaking the FCK out. A minute or 2 pass. A ding goes over the PA system. Vayon comes out of the rooms. PA system says, "Thanks for being cooperative during our drill. And have a nice day." TLDR. Apparently the drill is to leave all the passengers to die while the staff remains safe at airport check-ins. Not on a plane but a train. There was a guy and a woman sat with a blanket over the women's lap. The man's left hand was under the blanket fidgeting around and the woman with her face in her hands. The man's right hand meanwhile was holding a Snicker bar he was trying to open with his teeth and was reading the sports section of a newspaper that was on the table in front of him. True stories, that is a boss. I woke up to a thunderstorm outside with purple lightning bolt. This is your captain speaking. We're about to get into a little bit of turbulence. I was on a flight to Chicago, was supposed to land at O'Hare, but about 30 minutes before landing they told us it was too icy and we were being diverted to Midway. Midway and O'Hare are 26 miles apart. So we land at Midway. We disembark and as we are leaving the Skyway, a gate agent runs up and tells us we need to get back on the plane. They were now going to take it to O'Hare. We all said FCK it. We'll stay here. She then informed us our bags wouldn't be getting unloaded. We would need to go to the other airport to get them. So about 5 of us, out of a full flight 90, got back on and had to wait about 20 minutes to de-ice the plane. Then a 15-minute flight to O'Hare. TLDR. Saw a creature on the wing. Throwing explosives in the engine. Attacked me. Totally freaked out. Dan Aykroyd drove me to the hospital. Kinda WTF. Kinda annoying. But the call button above the seat behind me shorted out with 5 hours left in a flight. Ding. 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 For about an hour and a half. It was very annoying. Not really WTF, but when I was a flight attendant I saw some pretty awesome fireworks displays from the sky every the 4th of July. Amazing. Is that flight attendant code for screwing in the bathroom? Not mine but my sister's. She was once on a long haul flight from London to Hong Kong. During the night while everyone was sleeping suddenly a woman let out the most blood-curdling scream. Since this was not that long after 9/11 everyone was pretty on edge as it was. It turned out that the woman had just had a bad dream. Everyone was pretty annoyed after that. I was in a Black Hawk helicopter and we were all kinda dozed off sleeping when suddenly the helicopter took a dive. When that happens you float up but you're strapped in. Feels very weird. My male friend sitting next to me grabs my hand and is screaming. After 10 seconds it finally levels out. The pilots never mentioned it afterward, so I think they might have been messing with us. It was really scary. One of those moments where you think, that's it, I'm dead. We used to do shit like that in a car as a prank. If you were the DD after a party and everyone was passed out in the back seat, casually slam on the brakes and scream as loud as you could. Good times, haha. That is really fking sad. I don't even like cats but I feel so sorry for that lady. I actually like cats. When I first read the title I thought it said what is the most WTF thing you've experienced during a fight. I was about to tell this story about how I used to beat the shit out of myself. Never mind. I looked out the window and saw this massive shark hurtling through the air and that was the last thing I remembered before waking up in hospital. Gremlin on the wing. No one believed me. I read this as fight and got really confused when everyone was talking about planes. My girlfriend's dad was a pilot and has some pretty funny stories. One time they looked in the cargo and there was a dead dog. And everyone started freaking out. They went out and found a live dog that looked the same. Problem solved. Well, when they finally landed this lady starts freaking out, oh my god, my dog is alive? What the hell happened? Because she was transporting her dead dog to be buried in her hometown. Lies. I believe he told you that. But I still think it was a lie. Not on the flight but before. I watched a Hasidic Jew get tased at JFK for refusing to remove his shoes, setting off the alarms and then freaking out that he will not let them search him. I looked out the window and noticed that some of the flaps on the wing were held on with duct tape. Sydney to Lax. 14. 5 hours. Full flight. Middle seat. Colicky baby to my left. Severely autistic teenage girl with a fear of flying to my right. Flight attendant assesses the situation. Looks at me and asks with a whisper dripping in sympathy. Can I get you something? Sir? Double Jack Daniels? Winking. Be right back. A minute later. She returns. A grave expression on her face. We're out of bourbon. Foo. Edit. Yes, she should have said whiskey. And I should have known better. Of course. Had I said actually. Because it's charcoal filtered. Jack Daniels is technically not bourbon but rather a Tennessee whiskey. She probably would have said, hey, thanks for the info MR. Wizard. Have a nice F-King flight. Instead, I just acknowledged her reply and thanked her for trying. She then brought me extra pillows and a blanket and gave me free vodka tonics for the rest of the flight. There's a lesson in there somewhere. Did they still have Jack Daniels? Date. The 11th of September. 2001. Location. On a plane 2 hours from landing in JFK, Nick, airport when the towers were hit. What scared the shit out of me was this flight attendant's face as she walked past me. This was before the pilot told us over speaker that we had to turn around back to Greece. I was just playing my Game Boy. Wasting time when I look up and see the flight attendants run past me with a face that looked scared to death. Has worried the shit out of me because flight attendants are always calmer than Hindu cows. So in my head I'm thinking, FCK. Something might be happening. And just imagining the plane was going to drop any second. It freaked me the FCK out, but then the pilot got on speaker and said the towers were hit by kamikazes and we had to turn back. The entire flight back, the only image I had in my head were World War II style planes with Japanese kamikaze flying into the towers, and I was just wondering why the FCK Japan would attack us.